I lost my parents and my 4 sisters.
Cultural genocide.
I think my dad really wanted to show me.
I started when I was 11 years old.
If I just disappeared, they really did genocide.
Cultural science.
Why shouldn't the world know about it?
Young police, back up, back up, back up.
To sell myself for $30 is pretty sad.
What you do to your land, to your water, to your air, that comes full circle at some point.
فقلنا له يا أخي أنا خوفي من الترحيل يعني أنا صار الهاجس الأمني تبعي إنه.
Soon the fire will die, the smoke and ashes will drift away, and grass will cover the place.
So we went from it being illegal one night, and now it's a constitutional right.
Parents or uncles having to go out into the woods and cut their 12-year-old down from the tree.
Every day, hundreds of millions of tons of icebergs carve off the glaciers.
The state of Louisiana fought for 30 years to execute Mr. Ford.
People smugglers are just heartless people, although they are human beings. They only care about money.
Shooting rockets.
Hostile environments, profoundly unjust.
1 million people could die in 100 days.
I think what they're trying to do is just keep us apart.
We have so much dysfunction.
Native Americans have some of the worst mortality rate.
What's instilled in your mind of what you experienced, what you witnessed, that's the enemy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jane Wells, and I am the founder of Three Generations, and I am thrilled to welcome today two friends from just north of the border in Canada, Debbie Rose from Project Abraham, and Surya Nasso, who is a Yazidi living in Canada. So welcome, ladies. It's wonderful to have you here today on the day that we are observing the 7th anniversary of the most recent Yazidi genocide. Debbie, I thought that we could start with maybe you introducing Project Abraham and the incredible work you're doing up there.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, I got involved basically in January of 2016. I had been following what was going on with the Yazidi genocide that had started in August of 2014. And, you know, it was so reminiscent of what had happened in the Jewish Holocaust. That there were so many similarities that I just felt a lot of compassion and angst around the whole thing. And one day, one of my friends, because I guess I was talking to my friends about it, told me that if I wanted to help the Yazidis, there was a meeting at this address. The next day I could go. My husband and I went. This was January 2016. There were a handful of Yazidis and a handful of volunteers there. The volunteers were helping Yazidis fill in application forms for private sponsorship to bring family over to be reunited. And, you know, my husband and I were hoping to volunteer in some way. The person in charge at the time, his name was Geoffrey Clarfield. He was with the Mazud Freedom Foundation, a new NGO that really didn't have family reunification private sponsorship as its mandate. But when they were approached by Mirza Ismail of the Yazidi Human Rights Organization International, basically begging them to help sponsor some families so that they could be reunited with their Yazidi families here. It was something that they just couldn't turn down. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where it started. And Joffrey at that meeting was making it quite clear that somebody needed to coordinate it because he had other projects. He couldn't put full attention on this, and it wasn't going to happen. And so one thing led to another, and I ended up volunteering to take a lead in this. In 2016, we raised $100,000 to bring over 3 small families. And of course, everything that went along with that, we had to have a team of volunteer in place. We had to do all the paperwork. It's a tremendous amount of paperwork, I have to tell you. We were very, very fortunate because in the private sponsorship program in Canada, if you put in an application, you're looking at 2 to 3 years before you see your family arriving in Canada. Whereas in this case, it just coincided at the time when the government of Canada was had decided to bring in some Yazidi refugees. And what they did is they expedited everything that was in the system with regards to the private sponsorship program. So you have the 2 programs, the private sponsorship and you have the government assisted refugees, 2 separate programs, but all for bringing refugees over. So because they expedited this, we had our Yazidis here within 6 months of the application going in, which was just amazing. It was a miracle.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. And from there, really, Project Abraham evolved organically. It was really, we were just a grassroots organization. In 2017, we were very much involved in just taking care of basic survival needs. We knew that the privately sponsored refugees tend to do better in terms of integration over the government assisted, simply because of the requirement for those volunteer teams. So we took it upon ourselves quite informally to recruit and train and manage teams of volunteers to go to these families that had just arrived to support their settlement. So that was very, very busy, 2017, doing that. By the end of 2017, we had incorporated as our own independent organization.
Congratulations. Yeah.
And then 2019, we got charitable status. So it was very exciting landmarks.
Even better. So how many families roughly do you help now?
Well, in the York region is just north of Toronto. About a 15-minute drive, depending where you're going in the York region. It's quite a large region, but 20 minutes. And there we have, I guess, about 250 individuals.
Wow.
Maybe about 40 families. But that's nothing compared to London, Ontario, which is a 2-hour drive from Toronto, and where Surya is from. And that has a much larger population.
Wow. Okay, so Surya, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and maybe a brief history of the long history of the Yazidis?
Well, I was born in Syria. My parents were actually refugees from Iraq at the time, from the war. So I did live there for a while, like for part of my childhood. I do remember it. Then we came out to Canada on a refugee status. I think we also came out on a private sponsorship as well. But I feel like when I lived back home, the culture was a lot different there than the experience here. There around, Eid and all of that, like the whole community would come together. They'd have these huge gatherings with all this food. But it's been a long line of just genocide after genocide as well. So in our culture, we pray towards the peacock angel, which a lot of people consider that as the devil, right? So yeah, that's basically the main reason why they continuously are going through these genocides and having to run from their homeland and are being prosecuted actually till this day. So yeah.
You seem to be muted there, Jane.
Okay, I'm unmuting myself. So Debbie was mentioning London, Ontario. What work are you doing with the Yazidi community in London? And could you tell us some more about that and your family?
Sure. I'm currently just helping out with the tutoring as of right now. So that's not too bad. But like, I mean, I do have like some, some people that are actually fairly new. They will come out, reach out to me. I do help out with some of their applications, stuff like that, getting them started, that kind of thing. It's like helping out a neighbor, the way I look at it realistically. So if they don't fully understand something, and I had somebody ask me the other day that wanted some help with an application that they're doing, and they weren't fully understanding it. So sometimes I'll sit down and I'll just explain to them what the document means, what their next step should be, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So just for those who may be listening who don't know much about Yazidi culture, could you, or maybe Debbie even, explain about the Comanche language and the countries where Yazidis are from, indigenous to?
Syria, you want to talk, or should I say something?
Debbie, I will let you have this one. I think you have a lot more information about it than I do.
Well, Kurmanji is one of the two main Kurdish languages, and but unfortunately, not unfortunately, just the way it is, but unfortunate to the circumstances in Canada, the Yazidis have their own dialect of Kurmanji. So even there's almost no professionally trained Kurmanji interpreters in Canada. There are a few now over the years, the last few years, but when they first came in 2017, there was almost nobody. And it was very difficult because even somebody who just spoke the language, it was their native language to speak Kurmanji, they still had challenges in the interpretation with Yazidis. So there was a really big challenge that way. The Yazidis are indigenous to that region, Iraq and Syria. Their culture claims a calendar going back almost 7,000 years. And I think that they're, and I hope Saria's okay with it, because I'm sure she is, but I think that a lot of the Kurds actually were once Yazidis. And the Yazidi culture is very close, so you can't marry in or out, you can't even take convertees to the religion. And so once somebody leaves, they are gone. And so when they left, often because of forced conversion over the centuries, from the Yazidi perspective, they are no longer Yazidis. So Yazidis tend not to acknowledge the Kurds as sort of their cousins, but many Kurds do acknowledge their Yazidi roots.
So
but unfortunately, because of all the persecution over the centuries, about 25 million Yazidis have been either murdered or forcibly converted over the centuries.
Amazing.
It's been really, really difficult. And I hear stories, that, if you are a taxi driver in Mosul and they find out you're Yazidi, they will not get in the car with you. Or, if you graduate from university with a degree in something, and the Iraqi government is responsible for placing you in a job, you're at the bottom of the list. Chances are you won't be placed. And you end up going back home and maybe running a store or farming. So I wonder how that affected the whole culture around education over the long period of time, because, if going and getting an education doesn't bring you success in any way, then you start to look at it differently.
So today, what we think there are less than 1 million Yazidis left in the world. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
Nobody knows exactly how many.
And the majority are still in northern Iraq, correct? Syria, Iraq.
Do you think? I don't know if they are or they aren't. I mean, because so many fled, there were so many murdered. We don't have the exact numbers. So many were abducted and taken out of the country. And we still have over 3,000 that we don't know the whereabouts of. Others ran outside the country to Turkey and to other places, tried to get into Europe. We've got some here, we've some in Australia, some in Germany. So it's very difficult to know where we have a majority of anything at this point.
Just a slight sort of pivot question back to you here, Debbie. As a Jewish Canadian, will you just speak a little bit more about how you identify with the monotheistic religion from that part of the world and how you connect your two belief systems?
I really feel like I'm taking this away from Surya and this appropriation, right? Because this is her culture.
Yeah.
But the Yazidi religion, first of all, is ancient, like the Jewish religion. It's very peaceful religion. They pray for the rest of the world before they say prayers for themselves. And my understanding is that when they have fast days, it's to understand what hunger is like for those who are hungry in the world. So they have never really initiated violence in all their time. They have a land, and like the Jews, they're very much a people, because the Yazidi religion and the Yazidi people can't be separated. And that's an unusual thing that the Jews also have. And unfortunately, like the Jews, they've been persecuted throughout the centuries. And this genocide is just so reminiscent of what happened during the Holocaust.
Sure. And also, Surya, I'm thinking that the situation of the Yazidis and the First Nations in Canada, there are similarities there. Is that something that you have noticed or identified in your time as a Canadian?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just like how they're finding like the mass graves of kids now, they're still finding mass graves like that in Iraq, you know, of Yazidis. Quite honestly, it's a lot of, you know, similarities between the two, in my opinion. You know, from what I know of, you know, the residential school systems, for example, like Prime Minister Sir John Macdonald, you know, he actually was like, okay, we need to separate these kids from their families and, you know, show them how to live not like savages. You know, so they were trying to also strip them of their culture, you know, of their beliefs as well. So it's a lot like, you know, what is happening in Iraq and Syria right now. So it's very, very similar. It's just, you know, one of them is still happening today. But I mean, you know, it's even with the Canadian, you know, system here, honestly, with the Indigenous people, even it's still not at 100%. I think Canada still has a really, really long way to go. I mean, you know, for example, there's a lot of Indigenous communities that don't even have access to clean drinking water. That should be a basic thing, especially living in a Western country like Canada, you know. So Canada still has a long way to go of improving on that as well. But it is very similar to what's happening with the Yazidi people in Iraq and Syria.
So you had mentioned to me earlier that you had been thinking about going home. Where would home be? Where would you go home to, and what would the challenges be for you to do that?
For me, to be honest with you, it would definitely be Syria, because I was born in Syria. I was raised in Syria. That's what I know as home. You know, of course, with Syria's got its own conflicts going on right now. But even without that, you know, I talked to my mom, like, Mom, I just want to go to Lebanon, maybe, you know, and I just wanted to be around my culture and all of that. And my mom, you know, she's like, you're Yazidi, you're going to get kidnapped there. Like, you can't go, you know. So it kind of sucks, to be honest, in a way, because a lot of my Middle Eastern friends, you know, I have a lot of Lebanese friends, for example, that will go back to Lebanon almost every single year. You know, they go back to their roots, they get to experience that. And I feel like I can't really go home and like experience that.
So, and in the community that you're helping in York and your sister in London, can you tell us a little bit about who's there and how many family members are there, and about what the community, the Yazidi community, is like in Canada today?
So the Yazidi community here in Canada, like, I mean, honestly, I think this next generation is, you know, going to be that generation where things with Yazidis doesn't happen in Iraq and Syria like it will here. I really think that, like, with the next generation, it's, you know, a lot of them are going to grow to be, like, you know, really great members of society. So right now, based off with what my sister's working with, I believe it's, you know, a lot like the YES program. Is that correct, Debbie? So, you know, a lot of them, I believe with the way that program goes, it teaches them, you know, like, you know, English skills, English speaking skills, writing skills, you know, so that they're able to go out into society and be able to, you know, start building a life here, take other steps, and, you know, start to get an education.
And is there, would you just tell us a little bit more culturally about some of the holidays and some of the events that you celebrate and how the community comes together? I mean, I've seen video and experienced some of that myself, but for those who have not.
Definitely. So yeah, like, you know, like Debbie was saying, we do fast actually. So we fast in certain parts of the year. I believe once it's in December and another one is around April. You know, we have our New Year Eid actually in April. I think it's in April. Debbie would probably know this better than me.
Like the Jewish calendar, it's not. No, it's not.
Yeah. So that's what we consider our New Year actually. So we do cook a lot of food. A lot of people will, you know, usually fast before that time as well. But, you know, pre-COVID, everybody, even here, they would get like a really big hall, like everybody would cook, everybody would come together, you know, so we would still try to kind of continue those traditions we had back home. Even with weddings and stuff like that, when there's a wedding, you know, the Yazidi community from, you know, the US will come down everywhere, and it's kind of a blast actually. It's a lot of fun. The whole community really comes together. They stay very close. So it's really nice.
To dance.
Yeah, they love to dance.
And it's a line dance that goes around the room and it goes on all night.
Oh yeah.
They never stop dancing.
No.
That's so nice. Okay, so Debbie, sort of practically and politically, what is it that you feel should be happening in North America to raise more awareness, and what's needed for the Yazidis back in Syria and in Iraq as well as here?
Oh, it's a big question. You know, there's a lot of debate over whether Yazidis should go back to their, you know, homes there, or whether they should be going to other countries. And a lot feel that it's just not safe for them. First of all, they're mostly in IDP camps, in internally displaced people camps. They've done nothing really there. All their homes were destroyed, many of their temples, their businesses, their farms, everything was destroyed. There's nothing to go back to. And it seems like the Iraqi government has dragged its feet in terms of helping them to reconstruct. And it's still not safe. I mean, the problems that existed prior to the 2014 that caused 2014 haven't really fully gone away. You know, they still exist, those conditions. And so people are really feeling like we have to give them an opportunity to come to other countries to start new. And that staying behind is just, you know, inviting the repeat of what happened. So there is a lot of debate both within and outside of that community around that. In Canada, we'd really like to see genocide victims being prioritized. There's so many refugees around the world. They've all suffered. War is a horrible thing, but being targeted for mass elimination is a very different kind of thing, and we want it to be prioritized, and I don't think it really is at this point in time, although we're very proud of the Canadian government for what they have done. They have brought, so many countries have done nothing, right? We're talking basically Canada, Germany, Australia, and maybe France a little bit, and nobody else has really done anything. to take the Yazidis. So, so kudos to our government for doing what they have, but we'd like to see more. We feel, and you know, for the Yazidis here who are so deeply traumatized and who don't respond well to Western therapy, and it's taken several years for therapists to try and figure out like what's going to work. Many professional therapists here think that the best support they could possibly get for mental health would be to reunite them with their families. Because when you come out of sexual slavery and you've been on the slave market and you've watched your kids go through horrific experiences and they've had to watch you go through horrific experiences, and you've left behind a daughter who's maybe 10 years old as a bride of ISIS, which is called, by the way, in that region, Daesh. And so in further reference, I'll call them Daesh. And then you come out, if you manage to escape from that and you come out and all your family's been murdered except maybe one or two, and then you're separated from them, you're taken to a strange new land with your trauma, with none of the language, with none of the skills, with none of the education. Many are illiterate. They're medically, like physically ill all the time. Being separated from those few surviving members is just horrific for them. And so bringing them over is like highest priority. And then, of course, what we're doing here is just trying to give them as much support as possible for integration, because they have so many challenges. They have been identified by professional settlement agencies and mental health professionals in Canada as the most highly traumatized of all refugees who've ever arrived.
Wow.
And that really shows when they're trying to learn English. They're just with their physical problems, with their emotional. We have a woman here who blacks out every day for a few hours, every single day. And she's been here, I think, 3-4 years now. And she's still blacking out every single day. And that is a reaction to extreme trauma. So, I mean, you know, I could go on for a very long time, but they need a lot of help. The YES program that Surya was mentioning is the Yazidi Education Support Program. We're very, very fortunate to have the Government of Canada fund us for 3 years. And so we're in year 2 now, and we've had tremendous success, because what we were finding was that the Yazidis, many of the Yazidis who are in the normal LINK programs, are called LINK, the ESL programs, here were not progressing in the way that other refugees and newcomers progress. And we needed to give them something. So we developed a program where they're getting a lot of customized, individualized attention. We've got a community garden for them here in York Region, which is wonderful for them. We've started now tutoring for the children, and we've now got funding for that to continue into the fall, called the Homework Club. That's really important. We're starting career development programs. We'd even like to create some courses for not just the Yazidis, but other refugees, newcomers, on their rights and obligations under the law here, so that they understand everything they need to integrate. There's so much that can be done and is being done. But yeah, we need lots of support and help. And thank you for this opportunity to talk about it.
Of course. I mean, I think the idea that you know, that we have to sort of grade levels of trauma is so disturbing in itself. But you know, to be working with such a totally traumatized population must be very challenging for everyone involved. So the hope is with the children, I suppose, at this point, right?
Well, we hope also that don't forget that the mothers start very young as mothers in Iraq. So, you know, you can be a mother of 4 children and be 25 years old, you know, and they've got the rest of their lives too. So yes, the children, we have hope in the next generation. We don't want to leave the parents behind. We want to give them a chance for you know, a good life as much as they can. So we're focused on
that. Surya, I don't want to ask you to go to particularly dark places, but are there any stories from your community that you think are important for us to hear? Success stories or just challenges?
I mean, quite honestly, I just think that people need to start being held accountable for these crimes. You know, I mean, it's great with the support that they are getting here, and you know, but it's just, I think it's just something that just needs to come to an end. Like, people need to start being held accountable. I think the United Nations needs to do a lot more. You know, I mean, I was reading Germany actually prosecuted somebody for it. And there was this story about this woman and her child, you know, that were being captive by ISIS, and they literally just tied this little kid outside in the scorching sun and just, you know, watched this child die, and did the same thing to the mother. Like, these crimes are just inhumane. I think, you know, people really need to get held accountable for it, like in a legal standpoint. And I don't see another way of ending that. I think if, you know, it's just something that the world kind of turns a blind eye on, and they're like, well, it's in the Middle East, you know, not here. It's just something that's going to continue, and we can do a lot by, you know, trying to get them out of the situation. But, you know, at the same time, there's a lot of them that refuse to leave their land. You know, I have a half brother back home, and he refuses to leave Iraq. He's like, you know, I was born here, I was raised here, I've lived all of my life here, I'm gonna die here. So it's not also fair to also be pushing them out. You know, I think a resolution needs to be met here.
And would you say that the success, the notoriety of Nadia Murad and her Nobel Peace Prize, did that change anything in a significant way?
I don't think it changed anything. Great book, though. I read it. It's absolutely amazing. I cried a lot, but it definitely, you know, gives you an insight into actually what's going on. I got that book originally because, you know, I was hearing stories about it, but I didn't know too much about it. So it really gives you, you know, like an inside viewpoint of being a victim of, you know, what's going on. But to be totally honest with you, I don't feel like much has really changed. You know, a lot of people don't really know about it. Other things happened in the world. People moved on, and yeah.
You know, when I heard about Nadia getting the Nobel Peace Prize, my heart broke for her, because that's not what she wanted. She went all over the world trying to get people to wake up and do something. And everywhere they put her on a pedestal and praised her and everything else, and gave her the Nobel Peace Prize and did nothing. So, yeah, that's Nadia's story is heartbreaking. She's very discouraged.
I agree.
Absolutely. Well, that's an important reminder for all of us that the most obvious end game may not be the true end game, or even the correct end game, right? So as we sort of wrap up here, yeah, I mean, tell me what Soraya, I'd like accountability is something that you hope for more attention. Is it important that on this day, August the 3rd, that we come back every year and remember the most recent genocide and talk about how we treat victims of genocide?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think it is something that should be talked about a lot more. You know, I don't think if it was something that was happening in one of the Western countries, the world would be so quiet about it. So it's like, you know, just because they're from the Middle East, does that make them less human than we are? It doesn't. So, you know, I really, really would love to see people being held accountable for these crimes, because, like, you know, like Debbie said, with everything that happened with Nadia Murad, like, you gave her the Nobel Peace Prize, but like there's still a lot of women and young girls that are being held captive, still stuck in that situation. You know, a lot of people come out, or that are lucky enough to escape with so much trauma. And on top of it, you also find out that the majority of your family has been murdered or slaughtered or is missing. You know, so it would be nice to to see people getting held accountable for it, I think it would just kind of go and show the Yazidi community that, like, okay, we do see you, we do consider you human as well, because as of right now, it's just that I feel like the world isn't really considering them too human.
Okay, and Debbie?
There is one project going on in Project Abraham. It's very long term. Our board member, Emmanuel DJ, is actually working with other organizations around the world, specifically with the Yazidi Legal Network, which is located, I believe, in the Netherlands. And they've networked with a lot of different organizations that are all working towards justice, to get justice and remembrance for the Yazidi people. I don't know how long it will take, but there are people out there working for it. So I just wanted to.
That's good. Well, thank you for that. And as I said, you know, I was reading an article in The Guardian today about how there is really no sort of globally coordinated effort right now to help the missing Yazidis who have been kidnapped and unidentified in the Middle East, either in the Iraqi government or in the UN. So all the effort is dependent on smaller not-for-profit organizations. So I really want to commend Project Abraham for what they're doing up there in Canada, and to, you know, ask everyone just to be aware and to support those organizations, because for sure there are many addressing different areas of the challenges for the Yazidi people. And I think, you know, we will, through generations, will continue to try and keep people aware and raise awareness of this most awful genocide, which is continuing in real time. So I want to thank you both. Any last comments?
Thank you so much for having us and, you know, being able to bring attention to the situation.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for sharing your experiences. And Debbie, for the amazing work you're doing there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay, well, as I said, we'll put up some information about Project Abraham on the blog on our website. And I wanted to conclude this live stream with a little bit of video that we shot of a Yazidi survivor who has hopefully safely resettled in North America. So I thank you both very much. And we will now go to a little bit of video, and thank you, and end the broadcast. Thank you.
عمل دستي داعش تابون و اختصاب كان متفروتنا يك هاف جارس فروت ما يكودو نفسها كانوها بري خلقي حيوان برسوكي حيوان دوان بون على اساس مدوقع حيوان برنسوكي هاتشي محتاج بوا متفروتنا يكودو محاولة أن تسخوا بكوجم مدجا راجي حاولة أن تسخوا بكوجم بريا زار وتخوات كر وكام كوري خوات ديلوان كراسة دا ابتراك بو زبستان بونس هاد ممال أسشو مدبخا دا عجدا زي خوا كوجم مني رايد دستي خوا كوج قد كربان زي خوا انتحاركم كوري مهاتا بامي دي كيرال دستي مدابو هاوال گو ماما مگو ها ماما گو چه کیرال دستی داده مگو ماما مچاوی ما اچکر مگو ماما زی خواه کشید گو چرا ماما مگو با اصحاو کار گو ماما کتا خواه کشت که بابی من نیل برا ازی چما باکی نم خویش که نم برای کتا خواه کشت داعش ديم راب يم هكرات بنا متتقعري